In the wake of Wednesday's domestic terrorism on Capitol Hill, many Democrats say President Trump should be removed from office, and there are growing calls for cabinet members to invoke the 25th Amendment. And some lawmakers believe Congress should move forward with articles of impeachment again. Let's bring in Virginia Democratic Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton, who supports removing the president from office in his final days. Congresswoman, thanks so much for being with us. We're glad that you are safe, given the actions that took place on Wednesday in the halls of Congress. In a tweet on Wednesday, you said that the cabinet should remove President Trump from office or the House should impeach him. You are a former prosecutor. Explain to the audience the legal rationale for supporting these measures, and what do you think would be the most effective?
Absolutely. And before we begin, though, I want to take a moment to express my condolences to the family of Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, who succumbed to the injuries he sustained at the hands of the rioters late last night. So my deepest condolences go out to his family. And I want to also express my thanks to the Capitol Police officers who fought valiantly to keep us all safe during the melee. Now, as far as the president and removal goes, I believe that the House needs to move forward on impeachment. You know, it's hard to conceive of any abuse of power greater than fomenting a rebellion against the United States of America, which is exactly what he did by inciting his supporters, first of all, to come to D.C. to rebel on January 6th. And then the president didn't just call them to D.C., he whipped them into a frenzy and then sicked them on us at the Capitol as we were performing our solemn constitutional duty of tallying the electoral count from the states. So yes, I believe that he needs to be removed, and I think the House should move forward on impeachment.
So he only has a couple weeks left in office. So I have sort of a two-part question. Is it even possible to impeach him with such little time? And also, even if you could successfully impeach him, you know, there's not much leading he's doing at this point. So is it more than just stopping him from doing more harm? Is it about sort of the greater message being sent out and precedent?
Well, we certainly could, move forward on impeachment, and I anticipate that we will. And once we get that through the House, then the Senate has a limited time for which they have to act. And, this is about so much more than just removing the president. This is about our democratic institutions. This is about the future of our nation. But yes, I mean, prohibiting him from doing further damage to our democracy and our country is foremost in my mind, and I think that of many of my colleagues. But it also would prevent him from holding office again. It would prevent him from, one of the things that he can do the longer he stays in office is that he can pardon people associated with these riots and the killing of Officer Sicknick. So it's extremely important that we do whatever we can in the House to uphold our democracy, and I think we'll be doing that in short order.
We know, Congresswoman, that Speaker Pelosi is holding a call with House Democrats today to discuss that impeachment. My guess is you'll be joining that call. But I'm also curious if you have spoken to some of your Republican colleagues across the aisle. We know, for example, that Representative Adam Kinzinger has called for President Trump, at least the 25th Amendment, to be invoked. Are you getting a sense from Republicans that this time around that they might be open to articles of impeachment, not just in the House, but we also had Senator Ben Sasse on our air this morning. He says he's open to hearing what the House comes up with. So have you had any conversations with the GOP members in the House?
Well, I'm very encouraged to hear a number of my Republican colleagues come out and call for the president to be removed by the 25th Amendment. But I think that a lot of them will also be open to the issue of impeachment. And what's interesting is that what we're not hearing are the voices in objection that we historically have when it comes to impeachment. So I think that there's a lot of fertile ground here. I think that the president's action in fomenting this rebellion and the storming of the Capitol has really been a bridge too far for many of my colleagues, and I anticipate that we will find Republican support.
So yesterday, the president finally released a video in which he condemned the violence. I just want to get your take on the video that he released. What's your response?
Well, it's too little, too late. I am not at all impressed by the fact that the president, after fomenting this rebellion, after calling his supporters to the Capitol and whipping them into a frenzy and sicking them on us. After his attempt at a coup failed, after he lost the election in a landslide, then he's able to read a speech that was prepared for him off of a teleprompter. I don't find that impressive. You can't start a wildfire and then pour a glass of water on it and say, okay, all better.
Congresswoman, 5 House committees are calling for the FBI to brief them on the investigation into what went wrong on Wednesday. We know that there have been a number of resignations, including the Sergeant at Arms in the House, in the Senate. But is it you? I know you, and we certainly honor those brave police officers and Capitol Hill police officers who tried to do their duty, but perhaps did not have the tools at their disposal or the assistance that they needed to get the job done. But and of course, one of those officers lost his life, which is striking to me. And we were talking about this earlier, that officer would be alive today. So would that veteran who lost her life, and those other individuals who had medical conditions during this insurrection. They'd be alive today if they hadn't been fed this misinformation. But are you thinking about some of the mistakes that were made in leading up to this day? It's not as if we didn't know that this was going to happen. We probably didn't know that they were going to overrun the Capitol, but we knew for days and days and days that the president was encouraging his supporters to come to Washington, D.C., and then he got up on that stage and told them that they should march up to the Capitol and that he would be right there with them. Of course, he lied about that. He wasn't there at all. He was watching it on television. But do you want to know and understand from law enforcement officials what actually went wrong?
Absolutely, because we need to ensure that this never happens again. And as horrible as these events were, we actually were lucky that it wasn't worse, So we need to make sure that this doesn't happen again. We need to ensure that we find out exactly what happened, and that responsibility is taken by those where there were lapses, and that we ensure that it doesn't happen again. But you're absolutely right. It's not like we didn't know this was going to happen. We had the very volatile mix of QAnon supporters, armed militias, Proud Boys and white supremacists and other alt-right groups coming and descending on the Capitol. So we should have known that it could have gotten much worse than it did, and there should have been more support there for these Capitol police officers. So yes, there's going to be an awful lot of hearings and an awful lot of soul searching, and I think we're going to hopefully take some active steps to ensure that this sort of thing never ever happens again.
What happened on Wednesday shocked a lot of people, and we're seeing some shifts, I guess, in the mindset of some. The president's cabinet is dwindling. A number of secretaries are leaving, citing what happened on Wednesday. Vlad brought up what Ben Sass said today about his support for impeachment. You were one of the individuals who supported impeachment earlier. I'm wondering how you feel perhaps your colleagues' mindset may compare to, the first go-around when impeachment was floated and failed, or, well, impeachment, he was impeached, but versus what's happening right now and how people are feeling right now about the prospect of impeachment.
Well, it's hard to imagine a situation worse than what we dealt with in the Capitol on Wednesday. And I think that a lot of people who thought, for example, Senator Susan Collins, who said, I'm sure the president has learned his lesson. Clearly he hasn't, and he's escalated the damage to our country and to our institutions. So, at this point, even though we have limited time, I think that we have no choice but to act if we want to preserve our democracy and preserve our republic.
Congresswoman, I have sort of two quick questions for you. The first is, as a representative from the great state of Virginia, just seeing a Confederate battle flag inside the halls of Congress there, when we know that the closest the Confederate rebels ever got to Washington, D.C. was about 95 miles away, never were able to breach the impenetrable defenses of the nation's capital. And we had to look back to the War of 1812 to see some of the images that we saw on Wednesday. What did that do for you when you saw some of those images and you saw some of those people sitting in the Speaker's chair, sitting there in the seat that the Vice President of the United United States had just moments earlier been sitting in. And I don't think that people have reflected enough on that, you know, regardless of how you feel about a Republican or a Democrat, the Vice President of the United States, which when we think about the continuity of government, was sitting in that chair moments ago before somebody overran the Capitol and sat in that seat. Just sort of what went through your mind in witnessing, wherever you were all spirited away to, the images that we all saw on our television screens?
Well, as a member of Congress from Northern Virginia, many of my constituents work in the Capitol complex and work there. So, you know, I'm always thinking about them and how they were impacted by the tragic events of January 6th. But for me, seeing what happened and seeing the people marching through the crypt and the Capitol with the Confederate battle flag made me very heartsick. And it had a special relevance for me because just less than 2 weeks earlier, I had been present in the crypt when Virginia removed its statue of Robert E. Lee, which was one of the two statues that Virginia had here representing us in the Capitol. You know, that was something that was very meaningful to me. I had, you know, sponsored legislation to do it. One of my colleagues from the state Senate and I, when we were serving there, tried to make that happen. And we were finally successful when the General Assembly voted to remove the statue. So just days earlier, we had removed that statue, and then to see these rioters coming and taking over the Capitol and hoisting the Confederate battle flag in that exact same space, well, I can't tell you the way that made me feel sick to my stomach. But it also has filled me with resolve that we need to make sure that we do everything we can to preserve our republic and our institutions.
Congresswoman, before we let you go, the balance of power in the Senate is about to shift. There will be two new Democratic senators. In light of that, is there a possibility that we could see Congress taking another look at a stimulus package for Americans? That $600 was certainly needed, but you know, a lot of people said it could have been a lot better. Perhaps a $2,000 check. What's the likelihood of Congress taking a second look at this?
Absolutely. I'm confident that we will take a new look at stimulus and COVID response, and that will be our top priority once we reconvene with the new majorities. I mean, we need to do better for the American people. For too long, there has not been a strong federal response. It's clear that we need to do more on vaccine distribution and administration, do more on testing, do more to get the economy going again. And I'm confident that under a Biden administration with the right support in Congress, we'll be able to do that.
Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton, thank you so much for joining us. Once again, glad you and your colleagues are safe. Thanks.
Thanks for having me.